What is it about Mondays, birthdays, New Year's, even the first cool day of autumn that make us believe we can become a new person? We are deeply drawn to fresh starts. We take ordinary moments and turn them into psychological thresholds. A Monday becomes a reset button. A birthday becomes a new chapter. January becomes reinvention. And maybe that's because we do more than simply live in time. We give time meaning. We use moments in time to mark change, to reclaim hope, to begin again. Today we're exploring why fresh starts matter and why those moments can be more powerful than they seem. This is a Karen Schaal podcast. I'm Karen Schaal, bringing you topics that expand the mind and grow the heart. Let's get started. Today we begin a new 5-part series with an idea both ancient and surprisingly scientific: fresh starts. Researchers call it the fresh start effect, the finding that certain moments in time can help us re-engage, recommit, and begin again. And that, my friends, is good news, because beginning again is part of how we grow. Humans have always been drawn to renewal. Across history, people have marked new beginnings, have built civilizations around renewal through seasons, rituals, and turning points. Babylonians were celebrating a fresh start in the vernal equinox 4,000 years ago. The idea of fresh starts isn't just a modern productivity hack either. It is embedded in human culture. Why? Because humans need ways to separate themselves from past failures, mark transformation, and create hope. A fresh start says, who I was yesterday does not have to define who I become tomorrow. Spring has always carried that invitation. Something wakes up, light returns, and often something in us wants to wake up too. We may find ourselves asking, what needs refreshing? What needs renewing? Those are not small questions. They are life questions, and they connect with much of what we have explored together. In episode 1 of the Brilliance series, Remembering Your Brilliance, we explored how growth often begins by seeing possibility again. Fresh starts touch that same century-old desire to move from the old me to the new me. And the research gets even more interesting. Katie Milkman and colleagues did not simply show that fresh starts feel motivating, they showed they can influence real behavior. Researchers analyzing Google search data found that after temporal landmarks like Mondays, birthdays, and New Year's, people were more likely to search for things related to exercise, dieting, and quitting smoking. Think about that. At certain moments, people literally become more goal-orientated. Other studies found gym attendance often rises after these same landmarks. And what fascinates me is that it did not require some dramatic once-a-year event. A Monday could work, a birthday could work, even an arbitrary new beginning could create a motivational shift. That tells us something profound here. The capacity for renewal may be much more woven into the human psyche than we realize. There was even a fascinating retirement savings study involving more than 6,000 employees. Researchers tested whether simply framing enrollment messages around a fresh start, whether this would invite people to think of this as a new chapter or a new way to begin well. And it did. People were more likely to take action on saving. Health, habits, finances, identity, fresh starts seem to touch all of it. And why might this work? Researchers suggest several things may be happening. First, fresh starts can create a kind of identity reset. We feel less defined by past failures. Second, they can create psychological distance from old mistakes, which can increase optimism. Third, they seem to elevate what researchers call aspirational thinking. We reconnect with the person we hope to become. I love that. And perhaps especially for those of us in midlife and beyond, that matters. Because one quiet lie people can absorb is that reinvention belongs to the young. The research totally suggests otherwise. Renewal remains part of being human. Fresh starts do not expire. And Milkman makes another important point in her book, How to Change, that motivation works best when paired with structure. Fresh starts may give us a spark, but systems help sustain the flame. Fresh starts plus practice. Fresh starts plus habits. That is where change deepens. But there's one thing of caution here, though, and I've experienced this a lot. Fresh starts can become a trap. If we keep postponing until next Monday, next month, next year, the next birthday, the next whatever, holiday, we can become, as I sometimes joke, professional postponers. And that is why fresh starts are not magic. They're tools, built-in tools. And the more we understand them, the more wisely we can use them. I find that deeply hopeful because it means the impulse to begin again is not foolish. It is a part of how we are designed. So how do we work with this gift of beginning again? I want to offer 5 invitations, not productivity tricks, invitations, because fresh starts are bigger than habit hacks. They touch identity, hope, and the very human capacity to try again. And I think that matters, especially in a world that can weigh us down. The first invitation is this: honor the power of thresholds. Pay attention to moments that naturally invite renewal. The Monday morning, the beginning of spring, fall, a birthday that makes you pause. These moments are not trivial. They can become openings. Rather than rushing past them, let them ask something of you. What wants beginning here? What needs refreshing? Sometimes change begins not by forcing life, but by recognizing a doorway when it appears. The second invitation: let fresh starts become acts of identity. This is much deeper than changing a behavior. It is asking, who am I becoming? There's something powerful that happens when a fresh start stops being about fixing yourself and becomes about growing yourself. You do not approach a new chapter with shame. You approach it with authorship. I am writing something new here. I think that changes the emotional tone entirely. It becomes less self-correction and more self-development. Third invitation: practice the art of beginning again in small ways. We've talked about this a lot. This may be one of the greatest overlooked skills in life: to restart gently, to begin again after discouragement slowly. There is wisdom in not letting one hard day become a hard season. A fresh start can be very small: a breath, a walk, a new decision after lunch. We often imagine renewal as something dramatic. Much of the time it's quiet and quite small, but quiet beginnings can still change a life. Fourth invitation: give your fresh starts structure. I remember even in grade school, I always thought Monday was a fresh start. I was always so excited. But by the end of the week, maybe what I wanted to do at the beginning of the week wasn't happening. It's because I lacked structure. This is where aspiration becomes embodied. Katie Milkman makes a point I love, that lasting change is not usually about motivation alone. It's not. But about shaping conditions that make good choices easier. Shaping conditions so that good choices become easier. That is such an important insight. We do not simply rise on inspiration. We often rise on what supports us. This is where habits, rhythms, and simple systems matter. A fresh start has much more power when it lands somewhere, when it has a practice to live in, And maybe this is where many of our earlier conversations on this podcast come back into view. The basics matter. The small supports matter. Remember that. Fifth invitation, think in chapters. I really want to linger here. This is important because this may be one of the most hopeful ideas in this episode. Life does not have to be one frozen story. There are chapters, and chapters can change. A chapter of striving can become a chapter of peace. A chapter of neglect can be a chapter of health. A chapter of shrinking can become a chapter of courage. Especially in midlife. I want to say this plainly. There are still chapters ahead. Fresh starts belong to us too, right? They do not belong only to the young. They belong to the living. And perhaps this is the bigger picture underneath all 5 of these invitations. Fresh starts are not merely ways to get organized. They are reminders that possibility remains. That we are not finished. That there is something in the human spirit that keeps leaning toward renewal. I find that beautiful. Because in a world that can exhaust us, that impulse to begin again may be one of our deepest forms of hope. And maybe that is what we are really practicing here. Not just how to make changes, but how to stay in relationship with possibility. And most of the time, that's where change often begins. And as we explored earlier in episode 15 of the Backpack series, simple practices help hold the changes we want to make. Sometimes a fresh start is supported by basics, breath, movement, a simple reflection. These ordinary things matter. And maybe that's one of the greatest lessons here, that renewal does not always arrive through dramatic reinvention. Most of the time it doesn't. Often it arrives through one good next choice. One choice toward goodness. One act that expands the mind. One practice that grows the heart. I think that's why fresh starts matter so much. They make change feel possible. They awaken hope, and hope matters. Most definitely, hope matters. Maybe this spring is inviting you to revisit something, reclaim something, begin something, not through pressure, through one small beginning. And perhaps that is how we grow into the fullness of who we were meant to be, not all at once, but through many, many fresh starts. So let me leave you with a question. Couple questions. Where in your life might a fresh start be waiting? And what is one small step you could take today? Not someday, today. Start there. Because perhaps a new beginning is less something we stumble upon and more something we choose, something we declare. And maybe that is the quiet power of a fresh start. I so appreciate all of you, that you're here. Appreciate you listening to the podcast. And if this episode encouraged you, I'd love for you to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need a fresh start too. This is the Karen Schaal podcast. I'm Karen Schaal. Until next time, bye-bye.